Welcome, friends, to Halfway There. This is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. Thank you so much for downloading. I'm your host, Eric Nevins. I'm glad that you're here. If you're not subscribed in iTunes or Apple Podcasts, in Stitcher, or one of those other podcast tools, please do that and leave us a rating and review. That is so helpful. Today, our guest I'm excited to get to know him a lot better through this conversation. He is happily married. He is a #1 best-selling author and global entrepreneur, which I'm interested in hearing a lot more about that, and a life to the full expert, Evan Money. Evan, welcome to Halfway There.
I am excited to be here, Eric, beyond belief.
I love that. A life to the full expert, man. What does that mean?
Well, that's taken me a long time to discover the final verbiage, but for someone who is constantly reading the New Testament for the first time,
I love that.
Those words really resonated with me, and it's like, okay, I came so you could have life to the full, and I was like, all right, so what does that look like in Los Angeles? To an entrepreneur, to someone who homeschools his kids, to someone who wants to romance his wife constantly. What does that really look like? And the more I peel back the layers, I discover that, first of all, everyone online looks like they have life to the full. You know, if you look at everybody's posts and everything, right? It's like, wow, they're living large. Look at this. And then when you actually meet them, you realize, oh, they're really not. And then you look in the church, and I would say 99% of the people in the church aren't living life to the full. So I really kind of dove in to say, what does that mean? And what does that look like? And then I realized it was like, you know what? We all get to be the conductor and the composer of our lives. And we get to create what life to the full looks like. So for me, life to the full looks like my bride and I get remarried in a different state or country every year. And so I've had 23 weddings, Eric. Woo-hoo!
That's fantastic.
And actually, it's more for me about the honeymoons. I've had 23 honeymoons too.
I love that.
Oh yes. So I wanted to repeat that experience more than once, and I was like, okay, this is definitely part of life to the full. So how can we recreate this over and over and over again? So I can never understand why a guy wants to settle for just one honeymoon. But with that, for me, life to the full is multiple honeymoons, having fantastic sex with my bride, having amazing children that we get the honor of homeschooling, and that's a blessing, and it's also work as well. And then how do I have an entrepreneur lifestyle, but where it doesn't run me, so we have a home office. And so I realized life to the full is kind of your own. You get to compose your own music. You get to conduct and put it all together. And so I spend a lot of my time now helping other faith-based entrepreneurs and other people saying, hey, let's figure out how to create your life to the full. And what does that look like being authentic to you and your faith?
Wow. Okay. So is that your business? Is helping entrepreneurs do that?
So that is one aspect. We have multiple revenue streams. I have other traditional businesses in the extreme sports world, paintball, airsoft, laser tag. I have another business in the synthetic turf world. So we have multiple revenue streams, but I get tremendous amount of joy and impact from watching an entrepreneur with the lights go on of, oh my gosh, we really can do this. And oh, wow, and look at this. Yeah. And so that's why I'm looking to spend more and more of my focused time for a larger kingdom impact of, again, helping others with life to the full.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. Okay. So I think we're going to have a great conversation. I'm excited to hear a lot more about how you came to this place, because that sounds like it's a real journey with God to get to a place of life to the full. So why don't you tell us, where did you grow up? You're in Los Angeles now. Did you grow up there, or is that a place that you came to later?
Yeah, so my bride and I are pretty unique. We're both born and raised here in Southern California. And so we're an anomaly, because most people are here, there, everywhere, or one's from here and one's separated. And I love sharing this quick story about, you get the typical, right? You go to church, you get married, then you go to the young marrieds group, right? You kind of grew up a little with them. And whenever the holidays came around, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the running question was, so where are you guys going? And we're like, 25, 26, 27, mid 20s. We're like, we're losers. We're not going anywhere. My parents just live down the street and mine are around the corner. And then as the kids started coming and all the baby paraphernalia and the car seats and all that, and pretty soon we're like, everyone's like, where are you going for Thanksgiving? Like dragging the baby. We're like, we're not going anywhere. We get to stay right here. So the table, we got the blessing on the other side of, we got this pretty good.
No joke. Wow. As somebody who moved immediately, we were married one Friday night, and then we were moved away out of state the next Friday night and never lived in my home state again. I can appreciate that and how beautiful that probably was. Wow. That's so great. Okay. So you grew up in Los Angeles. Did you have a faith background? Like, did your parents grow up going to church, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, I'm still looking back and peeling back some of these layers. So what was interesting about growing up was early on, we went to a private school, and yeah, I think it was just one of those, you don't know what you don't know, and it's just you kind of grow up with it. So it's just kind of there. And I don't ever remember anyone actually laying out the Gospels and kind of what Jesus did for us. Maybe he did, but from kindergarten to sixth grade, maybe just wasn't, there to receive it. But so again, in that world, but we never went to a church, which is interesting. So I think a lot of people just, send my kids to Christian school, but never went to church. And then later, I didn't realize it till later, but found out that my mom was really big into est. A lot of people may or may not be familiar with that, but est turns into Joy Spring and Life Spring. And now there's spin-offs of that today that are going strong. But a lot of what would be considered back then, it's so interesting. What was considered 30, 40 years ago woo-woo is now standard practice vocabulary in the church.
Interesting.
So so some of that was just normal personal development mixed with a little woo-woo, mixed with some general spiritual truths. And some of the stuff is fantastic. Some of it is just like, whoa, what the heck was that? Yeah. But my mom was, go ahead.
Well, is that like law of attraction kind of stuff? Or is that like, I don't know anything about
this. No, this was like pre-law of attraction. This was more just about, really about personal development and how you grow and how you look at the world. And hey, just because this is what's true for me, is that what's really true? Right? Or is this just kind of a story I'm telling myself? Like, I'm not good at this and that. But basically just calling yourself on your own stuff. Is really, And so with that, though, it kind of went down. They have different sects that kind of went down like different paths. So some of them had like spiritual enlightenment, and, it kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And some, like I said, some of it was just like, I don't know. But so my mom was, I would say, very spiritual, but she was just, I think, running from the legalistic side of religion. Yep. And so she kind of painted a very really unique picture for us. And she was big on, because my dad left not too long. I come from a normal dysfunctional family, so that's I think like all of us do. Yep. And so my dad was gone when I was 4 or 5, and raised by a single mother. And even today, I think men don't really understand the damage that gets done without having a father. Yeah. And so understanding that women can only raise boys. And so there's all kinds of stuff that led to. But just from a spiritual aspect, my mom never forced anything on us. She just exposed us to a lot. And it was one of those, hey, you're going to kind of figure this out. So that was kind of the early upbringing.
Yeah. So how did you figure it out, and how did you eventually find Christ?
I'm still figuring it out.
Sure, of course.
Like you mentioned earlier, like you're talking about earlier, like this, make it sound like I've arrived. It's like, no, we're still, again, every time I open the scriptures, I'm like, where was that? That wasn't there last year. What? Oh my gosh. And so again, just reading it again for the first time. And so I marvel at, like, quick ADD segue, but our church now has moved into that, really upfront kind of, hey, we're back to basics, seeker friendly, we're real dialed into the new person that hasn't gone to church. Yeah. And a lot of people are just kind of like, oh, well, we want these deep spiritual truths and da-da-da-da-da. And to those people, I'm like, well, tell me where you are with Matthew 5-9.
Right.
You know, like how, you know, what's going on? You know, are you really praying for your enemies? You know, have you really forgiven your dad? It's like, you want these deep spiritual truths. Let's start with actually, you know, loving your neighbor as yourself. How about that?
Right.
So again, with that,
go ahead.
It's a new event. I mean, really, the more you grow, the more you don't know. So for me, it's this brand new adventure in Christ almost every day, because again, I just look back and realize, wow, I still have so much to learn. Oh my God. So I'm still processing, but it's an exciting time to, I don't know, really kind of uncover, because with technology now, we have so much available, and we get all these different opinions, and just listening to every one of your past guests, I think, is like the ultimate spiritual journey in itself, because you can just, I'm telling you, man. So
I love that.
You can delete all those other podcasts. Just dial into this one. Go through all one. I think up to 150 now. Go through all 150, and I think spiritually you'll have such massive growth. It'll be incredible.
Yeah, it is good. But so, did you ever have a time then when you like committed your life to Christ? Was that a thing, or did you just do it? Like, what? I want to hear that story.
Yeah, you know, the more, this is what I share with people all the time. And again, looking at some of the past titans you've had on the show, this may be basic, rudimentary, you know, stuff, but I always look, you know, the Christian movement per se always likes to kind of go in this, we're going to quantify it by how many people got saved. Right? Yeah. Like, oh, we did this youth group and they come back with the numbers. Okay, 30 decisions for Christ. Woo! Yeah. We're supposed to yell and scream and all this. And that quote unquote decision for Christ, people always act like that's the end all be all.
Oh, yeah.
When in fact, that is the birth of the baby.
Right.
And
totally
in Los Angeles, you look on the back of police cars and there's all these things like, don't abandon your baby, right? Like, hey, because that was kind of the big thing. It's like, so the whole Christian movement is about abandoning the baby. It's like, you're safe, see you later.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. They're this vulnerable newborn screaming in the night, and you're acting like, oh yeah, they're good. So yeah, I had a moment, I would say, of legalistic, like, hey, come forward at an altar call.
Sure.
Kind of emotional, get stirred. But then as I look back, I'm like, you know what? Yes, we've made that decision, but it's really the daily decisions I make of, you know, hey, am I really going to connect with God today, or am I going to blow him off because I'm too busy?
Right.
And I've got a podcast to get to, and I've got emails to answer, and I've got this, and I've got that. So I'm not too much of a huge fan on this whole, like, okay, I made this decision for Christ. And, you know, it's like, well, no, that's just the birth. So yeah, I was born in a hospital in San Pedro. It's like,
right.
Well, what have you done in the last 48 years since then?
Well, I totally agree. And that's why the show is called Halfway There, right? Because we tend to think that there's a place there where we're going to get to, that it's called spiritual maturity. And that place does not exist. It's just we're walking on the road with the Lord. And so, but I do think there are these moments that can be significant to us, and that we each have them. And that, you know, the moment when we discover that God loves us is super important, and it is worth sharing, you know, as far as that goes. But I hear what you're saying. So it sounds like it was kind of a legalistic kind of a environment, or was it just
no?
You just look at it and go.
For me, it was that, you know, hey, we've had this one moment, but like going back to what you just said, Eric. Yeah, this moment that God loves me. But I think if we're all totally transparent and honest with ourselves, in the last week, and I know I've doubted that 100%.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Hey, God, why are you forsaking me? I'm over here. What about me? You know, what's going on?
Right.
And so, sure, I could go back to that time when, 25 years ago when I gave my life to Christ. It's like, well, no, it's like, how come I feel forsaken and left and lost right now? So to me, I kind of look at it as, you know, it's really, you know, and I was sharing this with another group, and a lot of your listeners may be familiar, but if you think about it, all fear, anxiety, stress, all of that comes from when you're thinking about things in the future. Yeah. That's the only time that will appear, is when you're thinking about future events. Well, what happens if, and this, you know, and then all disappointment, all anger, regret, that all comes from when you think about stuff in the past. And so it's like, okay, how can I be with Christ right now?
Yeah.
What does that look like in 2018 with Skype and Instagram and Facebook and all of this stuff and running a business, running a family, doing that? What does that really look like? So for me, it's really more about, okay, right now in this current relationship, am I doing exactly what God wants me to do? Or am I having that ultimate power struggle where it's like, okay, God, I'm going to go do this, so go bless me.
Yeah, right. Well, take us into that a little bit. So take us into how you discovered that presence, or the value of being present, and how you practice it.
So for me, I have found just very recently if I have actually done what God has asked me to do, I look at the day and there's all the things that I wanted to get done, right? All the things that I thought were important, all the money that I wanted to make and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then I look at the fulfillment side of like, God said, hey, I really wanted you to pour in this person's life today. And when I do those things, I find at the end of the day, I'm just like, wow, this was a great day. And gosh, all the things on my side of the ledger didn't really get checked off.
Yeah.
When I did the things that God really wanted me to do, gosh, I really feel amazing. And then those other days when it's, okay, I'm going to get my to-do list and do this and da-da-da-da-da-da, it's, again, not as fulfilling. And it's like, wait, did I miss something? And God, what about me? And where am I? And what's going on? And usually, again, those are on opposite lists, so to speak. But what I like to share with people as far as life to the full and the sweet spot is, and this is a paraphrase of, I think it was Max Lucado, but doing things that bring you joy, that's number one. It's got to bring you joy. So looking at you and seeing you in this environment, I know this podcast brings you joy. So it's
absolutely
doing things that bring you joy, doing things that bring others healing or bringing benefit to others. So bring you joy, others healing, and other benefit, and things that glorify God. And when you can get those three circles, right, the middle of those three circles, that's really where it's at.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, so what, how can I find more of those things to do? And the other thing I like to share with is life is really about, I believe, is living your dreams and serving other people. Mm-hmm. And greatness is doing those both at the same time.
Absolutely.
So it's, how can I live this dream and be serving someone at the same time?
Well, tell me a story about how you discovered that for yourself. Like, tell me a time when you found yourself serving others and living your dreams, and you went, this is it. This is who I am.
Wow. No, that's been a 25-year journey, Eric, because for a lot of people, I remember listening to the podcast about, and I'm pronouncing it wrong, is the Enneagram? Is that how you say it?
Enneagram, yeah. It's Suzanne Stabile a couple weeks ago.
Okay, so pre-Enneagram, and again, I didn't know the Enneagram was so old and ancient, this whole oral tradition, but pre all of that, I think one of the biggest awakenings in the church was the love languages, right?
Sure.
And it was like, oh my gosh, wow, we've missed this whole thing. Whoa, okay. So you kind of have this love language awakening. But really, for me, to answer your question, it is I had to really learn how to actually love myself, because you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
So as normal dysfunctional family, dad's not in the house. I'm this confused male. I've got all this shame and guilt from all the stuff in the past. Now I'm this married Christian man, and what do I do with all the shame and guilt? Right? Well, give it to God. Well, what does that look like exactly?
Yes.
Right? So processing that, but the core of it is like, how can I actually love myself? So in order to love myself, I have to understand myself. So the love language is the first one. Oh, I have a love language. Okay, got that. And then you go through like Florence Littauer's greatest, right? The personality tree. I'm sure you're familiar with that one.
I don't think I've heard of that, actually.
Oh, okay. She was like the original with the personalities in the faith-based world. And then I forgot who picked it up and changed it into the animals, right? So you've got the golden retriever.
Oh, yeah.
You've got the otter. You've got all the different animals that represent our basic personalities. And other people have Myers-Briggs. So first we discovered the love languages. Then I discovered personalities.
Yeah.
And what I love about Florence's book is she was the only one to dive into having a personality mask. So depending on the trauma that you've gone through, you may have had to put on a mask. So you may have been the hard charger, kind of lion, kind of like leader, but because of all the trauma and stuff's going on, you may have had to put on the mask of the happy fun guy.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people just, oh yeah, we're having fun, we're great, woohoo! But deep down, that's not who they are, and they've had to put this mask to protect themselves. So once I figured out my personality, then I figured, my love language, then it was my personality.
Yeah.
And the next step came with...
Hold on, be specific for me. So what is your love language and your personality and
sure.
your mask?
So my love language is non-sexual physical touch.
Okay.
So you have to put the non-sexual part.
You do.
Every guy thinks they're physical touch, right?
Right.
So it's non-sexual physical touch. So that was a big awakening. And then my bride's is acts of service. And so I could never figure out why we'd always have great sex after I did the dishes. I'm like, what do dishes have to do with great sex?
Right.
And it finally connected. It was like, oh, she's
nice.
acts of service. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
And so my personality, and Florence has these crazy PhD names for everything. That's why I like the animals to make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
But my personality, she calls it the sanguine or sanguine. And that's more of the happy, fun. Hey, if it's not fun, I don't want to do it.
Right.
How can we figure out how to make it fun even when it's not?
Yeah.
So that's kind of me, just woohoo, that kind of personality.
I kind of picked up on that.
And then my bride is more of the personality of, hey, I want to put everything in its place. Got to have some order.
Yes.
How do we put this together? So she had to learn how to kind of live in the eye of the storm and put all that together. So those things started the self-love process. And then the next big awakener was now discover your strengths, or the strengths finder.
Yeah. That's a game changer.
Yes. And that huge opening of, again, answering your original question. So one of my top strengths was significance. And so I, for a long time, thought I was this closet narcissist and didn't want to admit it to anybody. But I was the one that was like, man, put me on stage, put me in front of the lights, put me in front of the camera. This is fun. Let's have a great time. Let's emote. Woo, that was fun for me.
Yeah.
And it was that, okay, well, am I this, again, total ego narcissist, or is this, what is this? So when I finally read that significance, it was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So this is kind of the recipe that God's created in me. So now going forward with that, how do I use that to find those points that we talked about? So what brings me the most joy? What brings me the most joy is being in front of the camera, being on stage. I would say entertaining and educating, having fun and bringing joy and hope to others. And then it was like, okay, so how do you balance that with what comes with everybody's stuff is that when the ego gets involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, and then you got that whole process. But those three books are really the huge 25-year journey of learning it and then accepting it and saying, how does that work with saying, hey, like we talked about, what do I enjoy? What brings others healing and what glorifies God the most? And tying in my strengths with that rather than looking at, and maybe Eric, you may have this, but it's rampant in Los Angeles, especially in the United States. There's a disease called compare-itis.
Yes.
And I don't think it's possible to become fully inoculated from it. So many times I think I'm cured and then it flares up again.
Yep.
Right? I listen to a different podcast and I go, oh man, how come I'm not that guy? Or how come I'm not that girl? Or how come I don't know that? And the compare-itis is back and it's like, So there's a constant, I'd say, wrestling match with that of saying, okay, this is who God created me to be. The world doesn't need another one of those. And how do I focus on being the best me? And that's just a daily journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media is designed to be the petri dish in which compare-itis grows, right? It's a big petri dish, and there's more and more of them every day.
Indeed. And then you get to that tension of, well, how do I do an authentic post?
Yeah.
Without trying to flare somebody else's compare-itis up? And how do I portray, myself or yourself, right? Like, how do we put something positive out there without inflicting, right, the compare-itis on somebody else? So with me, for those of you that can't see or don't know the picture, so my hairline definitely does not invoke any compare-itis. So I know I'm good there.
Oh, that's awesome. So you had to figure out how to love yourself and how to care about yourself. So where did that take you from there in terms of, because you started to talk about, that was the first piece. Like, so what happened after that?
Yeah, I think it's for me, at least for me anyway, it just seemed like this. And again, my compare eyes flares up totally when I hear people like, oh, like Rob, my friend Rob Decker,
Yeah.
who connected us. When he tells his story, I'm just like, oh, he has this high, this great low, and this great high, and then it's like dun dun dun, and then God spoke to me, and everything's great, and it's like, man, that wasn't my deal. That wasn't my journey. Although I'm glad I didn't break my back.
Right. Yeah. For the record, guys, Rob Decker jumped out of a window and almost killed himself. That was episode number 78. So go check that in the Halfway There archives. You guys can listen to the whole story. He shared it with us.
Yeah. That is tremendous. So mine was like this slow, I call it like you take a 180-degree turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mine is like 1 degree a year almost, or actually, no, 1 degree a month. Just this tiny little tick, 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 where like a Rob Decker is 180 in 1 hour, right? Mine is like 180 in 20 years, right? Just 1 degree, a little here, a little there, a little there, a little. And I'm like, just give me the grand awakening and all this stuff. So it took me a long time, and it's still work to love myself. And then it's that, okay, now that I've done that, now how do we fully love God? And to fully love God, this is the big one, Eric, and all the billion listeners out there. If you really want to love God, then that means you have to love people. Oh, man. And not the people that are lovable, right?
Yes.
It's like, let's try that deep theology on for a minute, right? So when your neighbor's not acting very lovable, how does one really process that? And that's what brings me back to my knees every day of this. Okay, God, if you really want me to love you, that means I have to love other people. And once again, I've fallen short. So help me in this day today.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of experiences have you had with loving God and loving people that maybe would kind of just give us a good picture of what that looks like in your everyday life?
Well, I'll share this one with you because it's recent, and it's something that I get tremendous joy out of. And then even often in those great joyous states, again, full transparency, is I often like, ooh, is that okay to be excited about that? Ooh, is that all right? Because other people aren't having this, and I don't know. And so there's always that twinge maybe of guilt of having all this joy about something. But so back to when we first started the call. So my bride and I, again, get remarried in a different state or country every year.
Oh, yeah.
And so just to keep track of everything, Eric, because we're always wondering like, hey, where were we at number 15? Do you remember number 17? So I finally got my bride a website that had all our weddings on it. And originally it was just for her, and then it kind of went public and then took off and became this whole thing. So the website is evanlovessusan.com. with all the S's, evanlovessusan.com. So all 23 of our weddings are on there. And a friend of mine shared with me, he said, Ev, you know what? You're the only guy, especially in the faith-based world, that ever talks about the upside of marriage.
Yeah.
So in the Christian world, I doubt you will find any Christian man talking about all the great sex he's having with his wife.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. And I'm like, man, this has to, it's like it's almost like a baby pigeon, right? You know they exist, but you've never seen one.
Right.
Think about that, Eric. Have you ever seen a baby pigeon?
Nope. Nope.
I've
seen baby robins, but not the pigeons.
Okay. It's like, I know they're out there, right? So for me, we decided to go full public and really just sharing the upside of marriage and just saying, hey, we're excited to be the happy honeymooners forever. And just, again, be real public about, yep, we get remarried every year. I have a honeymoon every year. I love great sex with my bride. Life is tremendous.
Yeah.
And what we discovered is that started bringing people a lot of joy and a lot of hope. So just recently, we have a big homeschool co-op, and I got connected with one of the moms, gave her my card, and on the back of my card, I have the Evan Loves Susan website. And we just found this out just a couple days ago. She had a sit down with my bride, and she goes, I was at the lowest point of my life. I had, my husband and I had all these challenges, and your website gave me the hope that I needed.
Wow.
That it was like, look, there really are happy couples.
Yeah.
There really are people that love God, that have a great marriage, that love their family, and it just gave her the hope. And that hope helped her continue. And now everything is turned around. Her and her husband are now just finally, there was a whole thing with the wedding rings and all this. So she just kind of broke down and shared what an inspiration we were and just gave her the hope to continue. And then that opened her up to let God do work on her and her husband. And now they're fully reconciled and they're going to get the ring tomorrow. And just this whole journey, It's like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so just from my decision of choosing to enjoy my marriage and romance my bride has now given these others hope and hope for their, life to the full in their marriage, and just kind of like an example of, wow, look, you really can do that. So again, my patented long answer to an Eric short question there.
That's good, because it means most of the time is people get to spend and listen to you and not listen to me and trying to stutter through a question. I love that. And what a cool idea of marrying your wife every year. I've never heard of anything like that, but I when I first saw it, I thought the same thing. Like, this is really amazing, because, not all of us have great examples of families, that are actually loving, that where mom and dad actually do love each other and care for each other in that way. I think that's pretty amazing and impressive.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's kind of the great experiment, because we're like, at our dinner table, the conversation. Oh, and that's how we got connected to the story I was telling you, because my daughter, she was talking to my daughter and she was just mentioning, my mom and dad are getting married again. She's like, what? What? Yeah, they get married every year in a different state or country. She's like, what? So, but the running talk around our dinner table is, okay, where are you guys getting married this year?
Wow.
And that wasn't the discussions around our dinner table growing up.
Either.
So I'm curious to see now, as they're 15 and 12, and as they grow into adulthood, how that will change them. And I can imagine them talking to future as they're courting, right? Well, we're going to get remarried every year, right? Well, that's what my mom and dad did, right? That was normal for us. It's like, I wonder how this is going to carry forward. This will be interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting expectation, isn't it?
But I will share with your listeners, Jack, this is what, and I think it dives into really our spiritual journey, because and sometimes we do two. Like last year we did two. I wanted more than one honeymoon a year. So we did two weddings last year. We did Vancouver, BC, and we did Playa del Carmen in Mexico. So what we've discovered with getting remarried each time that translates really to our spiritual journey is, when I'm renewing, my bride and I are renewing our vows, we're in one of two states for the entire year. So the first state is we're planning this fun, exciting honeymoon wedding, because the first wedding, as you recall, Eric, is super stressful. It's like, where's Aunt Martha going to sit? Do we have? We can't invite all the people we want because it's too expensive, and it's $100 a plate. But after that, it's just fun. And there's no expectation. It's just pure fun. So we're in a stage of anticipation, like, okay, it's going to be fun. And we're going to have a honeymoon. And then the next rest of the year is we're on this post-honeymoon bliss. So we're in these two states of excitement and joy and all of this wrapped around. But when we actually do the vow renewal and this recommittal, it's magical, Eric. There's a transformation that happens of just like, and you get reinvigorated and reignited and reconvicted all over again. And it also helps us with our faith walk, because that's part of the deal, right? The bride of Christ and the church and all of that. So every renewal is almost like a recommittal and a re-altar call, re-coming forward, because I don't think you can commit to a marriage and not commit to Christ. So I think this constant renewal is a it's such a key for our spiritual walk, and of course that everything affects everything else. So I think there's so many benefits to it.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Besides the great sex, I just want to make sure I put that in.
God bless great sex. That's fantastic. I was just thinking, I used to say just sort of jokingly that I would never get married again, right? Because it was just so stressful. To your point,
yes.
That's just not something I want to go through again. But wow, you actually get married every year, and sometimes twice, and it's a good experience.
Oh yes, yeah. The first one was, but now it's just like they all just make up for that. I feel bad. I feel bad for most of the husbands don't care. So to hear you, I can only imagine what you went through. But for the bride, talk about unrealistic expectations, all this stuff, da da da. So this is almost like a chance for her to let her hair down because it's like, I've already done this. We've already passed the test, right? We've already gone through it. Now It's just fun and relaxing and joyful, and it's like.
You remove those expectations and you focus on the stuff that you should be focused on in the first place.
Yeah, and it's the same with our faith, right? I think so often we have these unreal expectations of, what a good Christian's supposed to be.
Oh, amen.
And right? Like the classic. I still remember my pastor sharing this. He's like, God didn't, God created sex. He's the one. He wasn't covering his eyes with Adam and Eve, right? It was like he invented it, and somehow the world has tainted that and destroyed that. But again, coming from that marriage excitement side, it's really, I think it's tied in and made our spiritual walk stronger. And again, when you release those expectations of what a good Christian's supposed to be, and it's when you really start focusing on, that what brings me joy, what heals other, what glorifies God, and the impact, I think that releases us from those first wedding expectations and the typical legalistic Christian expectations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. All right, that's some good stuff. So I wanted to ask you, because I always like to ask this, have you ever had a time when you felt like God was far away, or that you felt like he was absent in some way, or you just were upset with him? And tell us that story.
That going back to our earlier comment, it's like a weekly thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, again, the compare-itis, with Rob, you get that clean-cut story, right? Like, I'm on the hospital bed, I'm paralyzed, and God says, okay, I finally got you, we can talk now. And it's like, so again, to me, it's this, I used to read the Psalms and think that David was bipolar.
Yes.
Because if you're like, dude, this, the first verse is, I'm the most blessed forever. God is tremendous. I love you. And then the very next line, God, why have you forsaken me? You're so far from me. And I was like, this dude's a nut. And then I started looking at me and I'm like, man, I'm the same way. It's like, some days it's like, man, we're together. We're linked at the hip. It's like, I can feel him. It's like, this is awesome. And then the next day, where'd you go? What happened? So I'm kind of in that daily of, gosh, God, I want this certain experience all the time. And then wondering, is it like, okay, am I not listening? Or is it one of those things where what do I need to work on to connect with him? Mm-hmm. So I think part of it comes from, I have these dreams and goals that God's given to me, but I kind of want them to happen this way. The way that I see it, right?
Right. And
God obviously wants to do it his way. And it's like, well, wait a minute, God, what's going on here? And I think there's that tension in wanting it to happen my way. And of course I can go run off and do it my way, right? And then what happens? It's like, Or I can have the patience and the peace to trust God and say, okay, if you showed me exactly what we're doing, right, then it's not faith, right? So
right.
To me, it's that daily battle, not really battle, but daily wrestling match of faith of what I want, my ego versus what God's saying, hey, slow down, let me show you, do it my way. And so, yeah, it's a daily thing. I would love to have a Rob Decker story, but I don't.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. There is I don't want to use the word tension because I'm not sure they're actually in tension. There's an oscillation back and forth between understanding yourself, which I think has been kind of a theme in your story so far. Understanding yourself and accepting that and embracing it in a full way, and yet surrendering it to God. Right? There's this idea in spiritual formation of a false self, right? Where we can create this false self and decide this is who we are in order to foster acceptance, or there's all kinds of reasons that we do that. You talked about the mask earlier, right? That kind of thing. But if we find our true selves and we submit that to the Lord, sometimes it is go and do this, and you go and do it with everything that He's given you, right? Because that's what He wants you to do. And sometimes it's wait, or I want you to do it in this weird way, or whatever, because He's like that sometimes. But it's still an embracing of your own personality, but in submission to the Lord.
Yeah, and the classic definition, submission is under the mission of.
Yeah,
and of course I would stand up and go, yes, I want to be under God's mission, with a asterisk, as long as it's in the way that I want. Right. I want it to be. So yeah, I
guess what I'm saying is even that asterisk is not necessary because He made you for that purpose.
Yeah,
right? We don't even have to try to reserve that. Hey, I want this piece for me.
Yeah,
no. God made me for this, and He's going to use me in the way that He wants to.
Yes,
and so even that is in some ways a surrender to. To kind of His thing, His lordship, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Oh no, I'm with you 100%, and it's easy to talk about.
It is. It's a lot harder to do.
Surrender to you, Lord. Then when it's my surrender, it's like, and that's my asterisk, right? It's just
that's true. Like maybe not.
So yeah, that's my journey right now for sure.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, well, tell us a little bit about kind of your business and some of the stuff that you're doing now, because I know that you're doing some. It looks like really impressive stuff. So I'd love to hear about that.
Well, I think it's really about for the listener. Everybody's favorite. Radio doesn't kind of exist anymore, right? It's like, what is radio, right? We got satellite radio, you got podcast, you got this, but the classic. I learned from Zig Ziglar. Everybody's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? So, for the audience listening, what's in it for you is if you're as an entrepreneur and you're someone who loves God and you're kind of in a faith-based entrepreneur world. And you're saying, hey, you know what? I've have some things here, but I know there's more. Or I'm really looking for someone that kind of understands the tensions or the oscillations of, hey, how do we fully embrace faith and business and entrepreneurship and life? And how do you, my classic William Jennings Bryan is many men can build a fortune, very few can build a family.
Yeah.
And so my thing is about saying, hey, life to the full is having an awesome family, having a tremendous relationship with your bride, having great sex with your bride, having a thriving business, and to where there's no such thing as balance, because balance doesn't exist. You can only create harmony. The classic, right? Oh, the work-life balance. Well, there's no such thing. So creating harmony, that kind of creates this life to the full. So as someone who's an entrepreneur, someone's listening to that and that resonates with them, they can check out evanmoney.com, and we have coaching available. We have, what I call Spend the Day with Evan, which has really helped a lot of entrepreneurs break through, because sometimes in a coaching thing, it kind of gets drawn out, and sometimes just a one-day immersive breakthrough can bring tremendous healing for people.
Yeah.
And then we have our Gold Life groups, where I always share with people, hey, you can trade in your old life and come to the Gold Life. But in order to have the Gold Life, you got to put the capital G, God first. And what does that really look like, right? It's easy to say, oh, yes, God first. It's like, so how do we really put that together? So the evanmoney.com website kind of puts a lot of that together. And so we have a lot of different programs for those that are listening. And again, on a marriage side, there's a lot of people that say, hey, I'm looking for, I love that marriage stuff you were talking about. So you can actually, again, check out evanlovesusan.com. And then we have a whole happymarriages.net website where we do marriage seminars and retreats and things like that. So lots of stuff going on to help empower and bless others with all the mistakes that we've made and all the things that we've found out. And it's like, hey, here's a great recipe that I think you guys can use.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic, because all the stuff that you just talked about, people can go and get more for themselves. And if they're inspired by it, guys, friends, go out and check that out. As always, halfwaytherepodcast.com has links to everything that Evan just mentioned, so you can check it out there. One easy to find place. Oh yeah. Or you can always go just directly to those links and find it as well. Man, Evan, thanks. I appreciate your story. Thanks for sharing so much with me. I'm inspired to love my wife better. That's for sure.
Yay!
And that's good. And I love it. Anything you want to leave us with?
Sure. So I would just encourage anyone listening to say, again, from an entrepreneur standpoint, or just to chime in what you talked about, Eric, in our men's sharpening group, we talked about this last night. We always talk about, okay, I want to create a fortune, or I want to build this business, or, I want to build the funnel, right?
Yeah.
I want to create this and do all this. And yeah, we understand that. I want to make my mark in the world. Or I want to, the classic, pastor cry of, I want to save all these people and do all this stuff. But what if you really said, hey, I want to get really good at romancing my bride? Yeah. Or for some people say, I want to romance my wife. What if you said, what would that look like if I got really good at that? If I put all the energy into my marriage that I am into fantasy football, or all right, or all the energy I'm putting into something else. What if you just really said, hey, what would it look like to be really good at romancing this incredible gift that God has given me? So I would just encourage the listeners to say, imagine. So for the guys listening, I challenge you. What would that look like to challenge yourself to say, hey, I'm going to get really good at this, and imagine the returns from that. And then, of course, all the women listening, you definitely can rekindle the true love that you have had or thought you had that you thought is lost. It's still there. So the true love does exist. It is possible. So I just want to encourage and let everybody know that, again, he came so we can have life to the full.
Amen. I love that. Evan, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you sharing your story.
I appreciate your time, Eric, and great questions.
It's been fun.